Chapter 9. The Luckiest Man in Babylon. At the head of his caravan proudly rode Tarkad, the merchant prince of Babylon. He liked fine cloth and wore rich and becoming robes. He liked fine animals and sat easily upon his spirited Arabian stallion. To look at him, one would hardly have guessed his advanced years. Certainly, they would not have suspected that he was inwardly troubled. The journey from Damascus is long and the hardships of the desert are many. He did not mind these. The Arab tribes are fierce and eager to loot rich caravans. He did not fear these, for his many fleet-mounted guards were a safe protection. He was disturbed about the youth at his side, whom he was bringing from Damascus. This was Hayden Gula, the grandson of his partner from other years, Arad Gula. Tarkad felt he owed Arad Gula a debt of gratitude that could never be repaid. He would like to do something for this grandson. But the more he considered this, the more difficult it seemed because of the youth himself. Eyeing the young man's rings and earrings, Tarkad thought to himself, he thinks jewels are for men, yet he has his grandfather's strong face. But his grandfather wore no such gaudy robes. Still, I asked him to come, hoping I might help him get a start for himself and get away from the wreck his father has made of their inheritance. Hayden Gula broke in upon his thoughts. Why do you work so hard, always riding with your caravan upon its long journeys? Do you never take time to enjoy life? Tarkad smiled. To enjoy life? He repeated. What would you do to enjoy life if you were Tarkad? If I had wealth equal to yours, I would live like a prince. I would never ride across the hot desert. I would spend the shekels as fast as they came to my purse. I would wear the richest of robes and the rarest of jewels. That would be a life to my liking, a life worth living. Both men laughed. Your grandfather wore no jewels. Tarkad spoke before he thought, then continued jokingly. Would you leave no time for work? Work was made for slaves. Hayden Gula responded. Tarkad bit his lip but made no reply. They rode in silence until the trail led them to a slope. Here he reined his mount and pointed to the green valley far away. See, there is the valley. Look far down, and you can faintly see the walls of Babylon. The tower is the temple of Bel. If your eyes are sharp, you might even see the smoke from the eternal fire upon its crest. So that is Babylon? I have always longed to see the wealthiest city in all the world. Hayden Gula commented. Babylon, where my grandfather started his fortune. I wish he were still alive. We would not be so sorely pressed. Why wish for his spirit to linger on earth beyond its allotted time? You and your father can carry on his good work. Sadly, neither of us has his gift. My father and I do not know his secret for attracting golden shekels. Tarkad did not reply. He gave rein to his mount and rode thoughtfully down the trail to the valley. The caravan followed behind them in a cloud of reddish dust. Some time later, they reached the king's highway and turned south through the irrigated farms. 3 old men plowing a field caught Tarkad's attention. They seemed strangely familiar. How ridiculous! You do not pass a field after 40 years and find the same men plowing there. Yet something within him said they were the exact same men. One held the plow with an uncertain grip. The others plodded laboriously beside the oxen. They were ineffectually beating the oxen with their barrel staves to keep them pulling. 40 years ago, when Tarkad was a starving debtor, he had envied these men. He would have gladly exchanged places with them. But what a difference he saw now. He looked back with pride at his trailing caravan. He saw well-chosen camels and donkeys, loaded high with valuable goods from Damascus. All of this was just one of his many possessions. He pointed to the plowers. They are still plowing the same field where they were 40 years ago, he said. They certainly look like it, but why do you think they are the same men? I saw them there, Tarkad replied. Memories were racing rapidly through his mind. Why couldn't he just bury the past and live in the present? Then he saw the smiling face of Arad Gula, as clear as a picture. The barrier between himself and the cynical youth beside him completely dissolved. But how could he help such an arrogant youth? The young man had spendthrift ideas and bejeweled hands. Tarkad could offer plenty of work to willing workers. but he had nothing for men who considered themselves too good for work. Yet he owed it to Arad Gula to do something. It could not be a half-hearted attempt. He and Arad Gula had never done things that way. They were not that sort of men. A plan came to him, almost in a flash. There were objections. He had to consider his own family and his own social standing. It would be cruel, and it would hurt. But being a man of quick decisions, he waved away his objections and decided to act. "Would you be interested in hearing how your worthy grandfather and I joined in the partnership that proved so profitable?" he asked. "Why not just tell me how you made your golden shekels?" "That is all I really need to know," the young man parried. Tarkat ignored the reply and continued. "We start with those men plowing. I was no older than you are now. I was marching in a column of men. As we approached, good old Megiddo, a farmer, scoffed at the sloppy way they plow. Megiddo was chained right next to me. 'Look at those lazy fellows,' he protested. 'The plowholder makes no effort to plow deep. The beaters do not even keep the oxen in the furrow. How can they expect to raise a good crop with such poor plowing?' Did you say Megiddo was chained to you?" Hayden Gula asked in surprise. "Yes, with bronze collars around our necks and a heavy chain between us," Tarkat replied. "Next to me was Megiddo, and next to him was a young man from the north named Pirate. Pirate was a sailor, and he was bitter and furious. He swore he would kill the guards and escape. We were taken through the gates of the city to the slave prison. The next morning, we were marched to the pens in the market. Here, the rest of the men huddled in fear. Only the whips of our guards could keep them moving so the buyers could examine them. Megiddo and I eagerly talked to every man who permitted us to speak to him. The slave dealer brought soldiers from the king's guard. They shackled Pirate and brutally beat him when he protested. As they led him away, I actually felt sorry for him. Megiddo felt that we would soon be separated. When no buyers were near, he spoke to me earnestly. He wanted to impress upon me how valuable work would be to my future. Some men hate work, he told me. They make it their enemy. It is better to treat it like a friend. Make yourself like it. Do not mind if it is hard. If you think about the beautiful house you are building, who cares if the beams are heavy? Who cares if it is a long walk to the well to carry water for the plaster? Promise me, boy. If you get a master, work for him as hard as you can. If he does not appreciate all that you do, never mind. Remember that work well done does good for the man who does it. It makes him a better man." He stopped speaking as a burly farmer came to the enclosure and looked at us critically. Megiddo asked about his farm and his crops. He soon convinced the farmer that he would be a valuable worker. After violent bargaining with the slave dealer, the farmer drew a fat purse from beneath his robe. Soon, Megiddo had followed his new master out of sight. A few other men were sold during the morning. At noon, the dealer confided in me that he was frustrated and would not stay another night. Instead, he would take everyone who remained at sundown to the king's buyer. I was becoming desperate. Just then, a fat, good-natured man walked up to the wall and asked if there was a baker among us. I approached him and said, "Why should a good baker like yourself seek out another baker with inferior skills? Would it not be easier to teach a willing man like myself your expert ways? Look at me. I am young, strong, and I like to work. Give me a chance, and I will do my absolute best to earn gold and silver for your purse." He was impressed by my willingness. He began bargaining with the dealer. The dealer had never noticed me since he bought me, but now he spoke enthusiastically about my abilities, my good health, and my positive attitude. I felt like a fat ox being sold to a butcher. At last, much to my joy, the deal was closed. I followed my new master away, thinking I was the luckiest man in Babylon. My new home was much to my liking. My master, Nananade, taught me how to grind the barley in the stone bowl that stood in the courtyard. He showed me how to build the fire in the oven. He then taught me how to grind the sesame flour very fine for the honey cakes. I had a couch in the shed where his grain was stored. The old slave housekeeper, Susti, fed me well. She was very pleased with the way I helped her with the heavy tasks. Here was the chance I had longed for. I could finally make myself valuable to my master and, I hoped, find a way to earn my freedom. I asked Nananade to show me how to knead the bread and bake it. He did this, and he was very pleased with my willingness to learn. Later, when I could do this well, I asked him to teach me how to make the honey cakes. Soon, I was doing all the baking. My master was glad to be idle. However, Svasti shook her head in disapproval. Having no work to do is bad for any man, she declared. I felt it was time for me to think of a way to earn coins to buy my freedom. Since the baking was finished by noon, I thought Nananade might approve if I found profitable work for the afternoons. He might even share my earnings with me. Then, a thought came to me. Why not bake extra honey cakes and sell them to hungry men on the streets of the city? I presented my plan to Nananade. I asked him, if I can use my afternoons, after the baking is finished, to earn coins for you, would it not be fair for you to share those earnings with me? That way, I could have money of my own to spend on the things every man desires and needs. Fair enough, he admitted. When I told him of my plan to sell our honey cakes, he was very pleased. Here is what we will do, he suggested. You will sell them at 2 for a penny. Half of the pennies will be mine to pay for the flour, the honey, and the wood used to bake them. Of the remaining pennies, I will take half, and you will keep half. I was very pleased by his generous offer. I was allowed to keep 1/4 of my total sales for myself. That night, I worked late to build a tray to display the cakes. Nananade gave me one of his worn robes so that I might look presentable. Sisti helped me patch it up and wash it clean. The next day, I baked an extra supply of honey cakes. They looked brown and tempting on the tray as I walked down the street, loudly calling out my wares. At first, no one seemed interested, and I became discouraged. I kept going, though. Later in the afternoon, as men became hungry, the cakes began to sell. Soon, my tray was completely empty. Nananade was very pleased with my success and gladly paid me my share. I was delighted to own pennies of my own. Megiddo had been right when he said a master appreciated good work from his slaves. That night, I was so excited over my success that I could hardly sleep. I tried to calculate how much I could earn in a single year, and how many years it would take to buy my freedom. As I went out with my tray of cakes every day, I soon found regular customers. One of these men was none other than your grandfather, Aradgula. He was a rug merchant who sold his goods to housewives. He traveled from one end of the city to the other. He was always accompanied by a donkey loaded high with rugs, along with a black slave to tend to the animal. He would buy 2 cakes for himself, and 2 for his slave. He always lingered to talk with me while they ate. Your grandfather said something to me one day that I will always remember. He told me, I like your cakes, boy. But better still, I like the fine sense of enterprise with which you offer them. That kind of spirit can carry you far on the road to success. But how can you understand, Hayden Gula, what such words of encouragement meant to a slave boy? I was lonesome in a great city. I was struggling with everything I had to find a way out of my humiliation. As the months went by, I continued to add pennies to my purse. It began to have a comforting weight upon my belt. Work was proving to be my best friend, just as Megiddo had said. I was happy, but Svasti was worried. I am afraid for your master, she protested. He spends far too much time at the gaming houses. One day, I was overjoyed to meet my friend Megiddo on the street. He was leading 3 donkeys loaded with vegetables to the market. I am doing incredibly well, he told me. My master truly appreciates my hard work. I am now a foreman. You see, he trusts the marketing to me, and he is even sending for my family. Work is helping me recover from my great troubles. Someday, it will help me buy my freedom so I can once more own a farm of my own. Time went on, and Nananade became more and more anxious for me to return from selling. He would be waiting the moment I returned. He would eagerly count and divide our money. He also constantly urged me to seek out new markets and increase my sales. Often, I went outside the city gates to sell to the overseers of the slaves who were building the walls. I hated returning to those disagreeable sights. However, I found that the overseers were very generous buyers. One day, I was surprised to see Zabadu waiting in line to fill his basket with bricks. He was gaunt and bent over. His back was covered in welts and sores from the overseer's whips. I felt sorry for him. I handed him a cake, and he crushed it into his mouth like a hungry animal. Seeing the greedy, desperate look in his eyes, I ran away before he could grab my tray. "Why do you work so hard?" Arad Gula asked me one day. It was almost the exact same question you asked me today, do you remember? I told him what Megiddo had said about work, and how it was proving to be my best friend. I proudly showed him my wallet full of pennies. I explained how I was saving them to buy my freedom. "When you are free, what will you do?" he inquired. Then I answered, "I intend to become a merchant." At that moment, he confided in me. He revealed something I had never suspected. "You do not know this," he said, "but I too am a slave. I am in a partnership with my master." "Stop!" demanded Hayden Gula. "I will not listen to lies that defame my grandfather. He was no slave." His eyes blazed with anger. Tarkad remained calm. "I honor him for rising above his misfortune to become a leading citizen of Damascus. Are you, his grandson, cast from the same mold? Are you man enough to face the true facts? Or do you prefer to live under false illusions?" Hayden Gula straightened up in his saddle. In a voice suppressed with deep emotion, he replied, "My grandfather was beloved by everyone. His good deeds were countless. When the famine came, did his gold not buy grain in Egypt? Did his caravans not bring it to Damascus and distribute it to the people so that no one would starve? Yet now you say he was nothing but a slave in Babylon." "If he had remained a slave in Babylon, then he might well have been forgotten," Tarkad replied. "But through his own efforts, he became a great man in Damascus. The gods indeed forgave his misfortunes and honored him with their respect. After telling me that he was a slave," Tarkad continued, "he explained how anxious he had been to earn his freedom. Now that he finally had enough money to buy it, he was deeply disturbed about what he should do. He was no longer making good sales, and he was terrified to lose the support of his master. I protested his indecision. I told him, cling to your master no longer. Get the feeling of being a free man once again. Act like a free man, and succeed like one. Decide what you desire to accomplish. Then, let work aid you in achieving it." He went on his way, saying he was glad I had shamed him for his cowardice. One day, I went outside the gates again. I was surprised to find a massive crowd gathering there. When I asked a man for an explanation, he replied, "Have you not heard? An escaped slave who murdered one of the king's guards has been brought to justice. He will be flogged to death today for his crime. Even the king himself is going to be here." The crowd around the flogging post was so dense that I was afraid to go near. I worried my tray of honey cakes would be knocked over. Therefore, I climbed up the unfinished wall so I could see over the heads of the people. I was fortunate enough to get a view of King Nebuchadnezzar himself as he rode by in his golden chariot. I had never beheld such grandeur. His robes and the hangings of his chariot were made of gorgeous gold cloth and velvet. I could not see the actual flogging, though I could hear the shrieks of the poor slave. However, when the crowd began to thin out, I went closer. On his hairy chest, I saw a tattoo of 2 entwined serpents. It was Pirate. The next time I met Arad Gula, he was a completely changed man. He greeted me full of enthusiasm. "Behold," he said, "the slave you knew is now a free man. There was magic in your words. Already my sales and my profits are increasing. My wife is overjoyed. She was a free woman, the niece of my former master. She strongly desires that we move to a new city where no man will know I was once a slave. That way, our children will be above reproach for their father's past misfortune. Work has truly become my best helper. It has enabled me to recapture my confidence and my skill to sell." I was absolutely overjoyed. I was so glad that I had been able to repay him, even in a small way, for the wonderful encouragement he had given me. Slave customs in ancient Babylon might seem confusing to us today, but they were strictly regulated by law. For example, a slave could own property of any kind. They could even own other slaves, and their master had no claim over them. Slaves married freely with non-slaves, and children born to free mothers were also free. Most of the city's merchants were actually slaves. Many of these enslaved merchants worked in partnership with their masters and were wealthy in their own right. One evening, Svasti came to me in deep distress. She said, "Your master is in trouble, and I fear for him. Some months ago, he lost a lot of money at the gambling tables. He hasn't paid the farmer for his grain or his honey. He hasn't paid the money lender. They are all angry, and they are threatening him." I replied thoughtlessly, "Why should we worry about his foolishness? We aren't responsible for him." She said, "Foolish youth, you don't understand. He gave your title to the money lender to secure a loan. Under the law, the money lender can claim you and sell you. I don't know what to do. He is a good master." Svisti's fears were not groundless. While I was doing the baking the next morning, the money lender returned with a man he called Sussy. This man looked me over and decided I would do. The money lender didn't wait for my master to return. He just told Svasti to tell him that he had taken me. With only the robe on my back and the purse of pennies hanging safely from my belt, I was hurried away from the unfinished baking. I was swept away from my dearest hopes, just like a hurricane snatches a tree from the forest and casts it into the crashing sea. Once again, a gambling house and date wine had brought me to disaster. Sussy was a blunt and gruff man. As he led me across the city, I told him about the good work I had been doing for Nananade. I said I hoped to do good work for him, too. But his reply offered no encouragement. He told me, "I don't like this work, and my master doesn't like it either." The king told him to send me to build a section of the Grand Canal. My master told me to buy more slaves, work them hard, and finish quickly. Bah! How can any man finish a big job quickly? Picture a desert without a single tree. There were just low shrubs and a sun burning with such fury that the water in our barrels became too hot to drink. Then, picture rows of men going down into a deep excavation. They lugged heavy baskets of dirt up soft, dusty trails from daylight until dark. Picture food served in open troughs, where we had to help ourselves like pigs. We had no tents, and we had no straw for beds. That was the situation I found myself in. I buried my wallet in a marked spot, wondering if I would ever dig it up again. At first I worked with goodwill. But as the months dragged on, I felt my spirit breaking. Then, the heat fever took hold of my weary body. I lost my appetite and could barely stomach the food. At night, I tossed and turned in unhappy wakefulness. In my misery, I wondered if I was to end my days in this canal pit. Then I remembered Megiddo's words, "Work well done does good for the man who does it. It makes him a better man." I resolved that even in this pit, I would work my hardest. I would make my work my friend. My diligence did not escape Sussy's eye. When the fever finally broke, he made me the overseer of a section of the excavation. He trusted me to keep the men digging. I did not whip them. Instead, I showed them how to dig more effectively. Sussy was pleased, and the work progressed rapidly. One day, a wealthy merchant came to inspect the canal progress. It was Arad Gula. He recognized me at once, despite my dirt and sunburn. "Tarkad," he cried. "My friend the cake baker. What are you doing in this pit?" I told him my story. Arad Gula went straight to Sussy's master. He drew his purse of gold and paid the silver to buy my contract from Sussy. He brought me back to Babylon and made me his partner in the Damascus trade. We built our first caravans together. Arad Gula loved work. He moved to Damascus, managed our northern trade, and became a legend. He did not achieve this because of luck, and he did not inherit it. He built it with the calluses on his hands and the determination in his soul. He used to say to me, "Tarkad, work is the key that opens every lock." The gods appreciate a man who puts his shoulder to the wheel, and they reward him with abundance. Tarkad looked at Hayden Gula's bejeweled fingers. "You wear his gold, Hayden Gula, but you do not carry his spirit. You think work is beneath you. But a man who does not work is like a tree without roots. The first strong wind will blow him over. If you do not learn the value of labor, the wealth your grandfather built will slip through your fingers like dry sand. Hayden Gula looked down at his hands. The arrogance had left his face, replaced by a quiet, deep shame. He slowly slipped the heavy gold rings off his fingers and placed them in his purse. I did not know. Hayden Gula whispered. I thought work was a sign of failure. My father never told me this. Your father forgot the lesson of the honey cakes, Tarkat said, putting his horse back into a walk. Work is the ultimate measure of a free man. It gives you self-respect, it gives you purpose, and it attracts the gold that builds empires. Hayden Gula rode in silence for a long moment, looking at the city walls as they drew closer. Tarkat, the young man said, his voice quiet but determined. When we enter the gates, do not send me to the guest house. Send me to the warehouses. I want to learn the trade from the bottom. I want to work, as my grandfather did. Tarkat smiled, a warm, proud look in his eyes. Welcome to Babylon, Hayden Gula. Your grandfather would be proud. Chapter 10. The Legacy of Babylon. The sun was setting over Babylon, casting a warm, golden-red glow across the sprawling, majestic city. From the high rooftop terrace of Arkad's estate, the view was magnificent. The Euphrates River wound through the center of the metropolis like a ribbon of polished bronze, reflecting the crimson sky. In the distance, the towering ziggurat of Bel rose majestically above the rooftops, its eternal fire sending a thin column of blue smoke into the quiet evening air. The sounds of the city below, the clank of copper vessels at the wells, the distant call of harbor guards, and the rumble of carts, drifted up as a soft, continuous hum. High upon this terrace, Arkad sat in a comfortable chair of carved cedar, wrapped in a soft woolen blanket from Damascus. His hair was now completely white, and his hands were thin and frail, showing the weight of his 75 years. But his eyes remained as bright and clear as they had been decades ago. Standing beside him, looking out over the busy city they both loved, was Tarkat. The years have flown by like the desert wind, Tarkat, Arkad said, his voice soft but steady. It seems like only yesterday you were standing in the shadows of Mathan's shop, a desperate youth begging for 3 silver pieces. Tarkat smiled, a deep feeling of gratitude in his heart. If you had given me those 3 silver pieces, Arkad, I would have eaten for a day and remained a beggar. Instead, you gave me a shovel, a seat in the temple of learning, and a clay tablet. You gave me a future. Arkad nodded, looking at the city. You have used the wisdom well. You worked hard at the harbor, cleared your debts copper by copper, built your caravans, and today, you are a pillar of Babylon's trade. But more importantly, you have passed the wisdom on. Mathan told me how you took young Hayden Gula into your warehouses to teach him how to work. He is working hard, Arkad, Tarkat said. He has his grandfather's strength in him. He only needed a path. That is the true secret of Babylon, Arkad said, gesturing to the city below. Look at this grand valley, Tarkat. It is flat, dry, and hot. It has no forests, no mines, and not even natural stone for building. We are not even located on a natural trade route. By all rights, this place should be a barren wilderness, yet it is the wealthiest city in the world. Why? Because everything you see was made by the energy and wisdom of its people. Babylon is an outstanding example of man's ability to achieve great objectives, using whatever means are at his disposal. We had only 2 natural resources, a fertile soil and the water in the Euphrates. But our engineers did not complain. They built dams and immense irrigation canals, some of which are so wide that when empty of water, a dozen horses can be ridden abreast along their bottoms. They reclaimed the swamps at the mouths of the rivers. They turned a desert into an agricultural paradise, yielding crops the like of which the world has never seen before. And look at our walls, Tarkat. These walls, started by King Nabopolassar and finished by our great King Nebuchadnezzar, are a wonder of the world. They stand 160 feet high, equivalent to 15 men standing on each other's shoulders, and they stretch for miles around our city. They are so wide at the top that a 6-horse chariot can be driven around them. Invading armies with 10,000 horsemen and hundreds of regiments of foot soldiers have laid siege to us for years, but always in vain. The walls have never been captured, for they protect a people who are productive, organized, and wise in the ways of finance. We are a city of financiers, traders, and artisans. We invented money as a means of exchange, written titles to property, and promissory notes. While the rest of the world is still hacking at trees with stone axes, our smiths forge bronze tools and our jewelers create works of art that will be treasured for generations. But I know, Tarkad, that kings will pass, and empires will fall. A day may come when the energizing human forces that maintain this city are withdrawn, and these great walls will disintegrate and go back to the earth from which they were built. The winds will scatter the desert dust over our palaces, and our ziggurats will become earthen hills, forgotten by travelers. Yet, even if the bricks of Babylon crumble to dust, the wisdom we carved on these clay tablets will endure. Money is the medium by which success is measured, and it is governed today by the exact same simple laws that will govern it 6,000 years from now. I am old, Tarkad, and my time is drawing to a close. I am passing this scribe's legacy to you. Arkad reached onto the table beside him and picked up the heavy clay tablet, wrapped in its faded blue silk cloth. He placed it in Tarkad's hands. Keep these tablets safe. Teach the 7 cures to the young. Write the 5 laws on the hearts of the willing. Let the world know that the rules of money do not change with the kings or the seasons. Tarkad held the heavy tablet against his chest, just as he had on the trail to Damascus so many years ago. I will protect them, Arkad, Tarkad promised. And I will teach them to anyone who has the determination to find the way. Then I am content, Arkad said, closing his eyes with a peaceful smile. Go now, Tarkad. Go build your caravans. The future belongs to those who work, save, and grow. Tarkad bowed respectfully to his mentor and walked down the stone stairs of the estate. As he stepped out into the streets, the bells of the evening caravan began to ring, their clear notes echoing through the city. Tarkad walked with a firm, confident stride, ready to meet the tomorrow he had built. And high above, the golden city of Babylon stood strong, a monument to the timeless wisdom of the men who walked its streets. Epilogue. The Nottingham Letters. Letter 1. From Professor Alfred Shrewsbury. Department of Archaeology, Nottingham University. Newark-on-Trent, Nottingham, England. To Professor Franklin Caldwell. Care of British Scientific Expedition. Hilla, Mesopotamia, Iraq. October 21, 1934. My dear Professor, the 5 clay tablets from your recent excavation in the ruins of Babylon arrived on the same boat as your letter. I have been completely fascinated by them and have spent many pleasant hours translating their inscriptions. I should have answered your letter immediately, but I delayed until I could finish the attached translations. The tablets arrived without any damage, thanks to your careful use of preservatives and excellent packing. You will be just as astonished by the story they tell as we were in the laboratory. We usually expect the dim and distant past to speak of romance and adventure, of Arabian Nights style tales. But instead, these tablets reveal the struggles of a person named Tarkad trying to pay off his debts. It makes you realize that conditions in this old world have not changed nearly as much in 5,000 years as you might expect. It is strange, but these ancient inscriptions really shook me up. As a college professor, I am supposed to be a thinking human being with a working knowledge of most subjects. Yet here comes this old fellow straight out of the dust-covered ruins of Babylon. He offers a way to pay off my debts and acquire jingling gold in my wallet that I had never even heard of. It is a pleasant thought, and it will be very interesting to see if his method works just as well today as it did in old Babylon. Mrs. Shrewsbury and I are planning to try his plan on our own finances, which could certainly use the improvement. I wish you the best of luck in your worthy expedition. I am eagerly waiting for another opportunity to assist you. Yours sincerely, Alfred H. Shrewsbury. Department of Archaeology. Letter 2. November 22, 1934. Dear Franklin, I have completed the translation of the first 3 tablets, and I am astonished by what they reveal. These tablets belong to a young man named Tarkat. He describes himself as a former debtor who returned to Babylon determined to pay off his debts and live as a free man. What is fascinating is that Tarkat's financial problems in 3000 BC were exactly the same as the problems we face in England today. He was in debt to local merchants, camel traders, and gold lenders. To solve his problems, Tarkat carved a plan onto these tablets. He divided his income into 3 strict portions. First, 1/10 of everything he earned was set aside as his own to keep. As his advisor Mathan the gold lender told him, "A man who keeps gold and silver in his purse that he does not need to spend is good to his family and loyal to his king." Second, 7/10 of all he earned was used to provide a home, clothes to wear, and food to eat. He was warned to live strictly within this portion and never buy what he could not pay for out of this share. Third, 2/10 of all he earned was divided honorably and fairly among his creditors. He records his visits to his creditors, including a food merchant named Kauskar and a camel trader named Dabasar. Some grumbled, but they all accepted the plan. In the 3rd tablet, Tarkat proudly records that his savings are growing while his debts are steadily disappearing. It is incredible to think that 5,000 years ago, a young man was using the exact same budgeting principles that modern financial planners recommend today. Sincerely, Alfred. Letter 3. May 8, 1935. Dear Franklin, please forgive my long delay in writing. The reason for my silence is rather unusual. Last winter, my wife Evelyn and I found ourselves in a serious financial crisis. Our household expenses had got out of hand. We owed money to the grocer, the tailor, and we were struggling with our monthly mortgage payments to the bank. I was constantly stressed, and we could see no way out. One evening, as I was looking over the translation of Tarkat's tablets, Evelyn said to me, "Alfred, if this formula worked for a debtor in ancient Babylon, why shouldn't it work for us in Nottingham?" We decided to try it. We treated Tarkat's tablets not just as historical artifacts, but as active advice. We made a list of all our debts, and I took it around and showed it to everyone we owed. I explained how it was simply impossible for me to ever pay them the way things were going. They could see this from the figures. Then I explained that the only way I saw to pay in full was to set aside 20% of my income each month to be divided proportionally. I added that, in the meantime, we would go on a cash basis and give them the further benefit of our cash purchases. They were quite decent. Our greengrocer, a wise old man, put it in a way that helped to bring around the rest. "If you pay for all you buy and then pay some on what you owe, that is better than you have done, for you haven't paid down the account at all in 3 years. Finally, I secured all their signatures to an agreement binding them not to bother us as long as the 20% was paid regularly. Then we began scheming on how to live upon 70%. The thought of silver and possibly gold was most alluring. We enjoyed figuring this way and that to live comfortably upon that remaining 70%. We started with rent and managed to secure a fair reduction. Next, we put our favorite brands of tea under suspicion and were agreeably surprised how often we could purchase superior qualities at less cost. It is too long a story for a letter, but anyhow it did not prove difficult. What a relief it proved to have our affairs in such shape that we were no longer persecuted by past due accounts. And we did jingle that extra 10%. After we had jingled to our heart's content, we found a more profitable use for it. We took up an investment upon which we pay that 10% each month. This is proving to be the most satisfying part of our regeneration. It is the first thing we pay out of my check. All this out of my same old check. All our debts are being gradually paid, and at the same time our investment is increasing. Sincerely, Alfred. Letter 4. November 7, 1936. Dear Franklin, if, in your further digging into those ruins of Babylon, you encounter the ghost of a former resident, an old traveler named Tarkat, do me a favor. Tell him that his scribbling upon those clay tablets, so long ago, has earned the lifelong gratitude of a couple of college folks back here in England. Our debts are now completely paid off, and our investment is increasing steadily. Evelyn and I feel like free citizens for the first time in our lives. We are determined never again to permit our living expenses to exceed 70% of our income. Now you can understand why we would like to extend our personal thanks to that old man whose plan saved us from our hell on earth. He knew. He had been through it all. That is why he spent tedious hours carving his message upon the clay. It is a message so important that after 5,000 years it has risen out of the ruins of Babylon, just as true and just as vital as the day it was buried. Yours sincerely, Alfred H. Shrewsbury, Department of Archaeology.